So my rifle deer season was a total crapshoot. Uh, Basically, so I hunted with my whole entire family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had me, my wife, and our kids, and her sister, and her sister's husband, her brother, and her brother's wife. Even grandma came out there. We all had tags,
Yeah.
right? Except for her sister, I think was the only person who didn't have a tag. And twice, so one time we were coming back down this, you know, the kind of the main road. Like we went up and we did our thing and we're on our way back, and we had crossed paths with her brother who was coming up the road, and then he went up to the top, turned around, and came back, right? And and then about an hour after we get back from camp, he rolls up to camp with a deer. And so, like, literally, we must have just crossed this area, and then, because we're glassing everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not really supposed to, they say, like, technically by regulation, if you even see anything from your vehicle, that's considered road hunting. But I mean, we're out there with our kids and everything. Like, what are we gonna do, right?
Yeah, you just got it.
We're just, we're gonna make it as fair as possible for the
Yeah.
for the animals. But
Yeah.
when you got a car full of kids, like,
Yeah.
once you get out and you've got to go do your thing, then everything kind of starts over again. So, but anyway, so yeah, we must have just missed this buck and a couple does by minutes. You know what I mean? And so, next day, I actually go down the road to a campground to go use the bathroom, and I take my dirt bike.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way back, there's this big thick clearing, and I come out and I see these deer take off into this clearing, and so into this not clearing, opposite, like a thicket,
Mm-hmm.
And so okay, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna go after him. I got my binos, I don't have a rifle with me or anything, I'm just gonna go in there. And I go in there and I'm sneaking through the brush and everything, and I see these does, and I keep kind of pushing them, and then finally I see a buck. And I'm like, crap. Like, okay, now I got to go back to camp, and I got to go get my gun, and I got to come back and hope he's still here. So I went back and got my rifle, and I came back, and the does were still there. But I stalked through this brush and everything, and I couldn't find this buck that I saw. And then I started to second guess myself, like, well, did I really see it, or was I imagining things? The next morning, about 100 yards away from that spot, her brother-in-law shoots that buck. And so I'm like, okay, like, I don't know if I'm not trying hard enough or what, you know what I mean? And so basically the rest of the season was just other people shooting stuff and us not seeing anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is all public land in a very tight area, and there's people all over the place. And we mostly just go because it's kind of family tradition, and we take kids, and we all camp together, and it's more about that really than hunting, right?
Exactly.
So elk season rolls around. I start off. I have a Minum bull tag, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get a Minum bull tag every year because if you're a disabled veteran, it's one of the few units where you can harvest a cow if you have a valid bull tag, right?
Okay.
But if you know anything about the Minum unit, it's like nearly impossible to hunt without like serious determination, like telling your family you're not going to see them for a week, like it's because it's all wilderness for the most part. There's a few patchwork areas that are accessible public land, and then there's some private timberland, but they've got a very strict travel management policy on it. And so even though it's private timberland that's public access, you have to access it on foot. There's no vehicular access at all.
Foot or livestock.
Yeah, foot or livestock. Yeah. So anyway, so I actually get an invitation for the first time in my life to hunt on private land, and so I forego the bull tag and go for the general season spike tag, right? And we ended up actually hunting on public land because they didn't actually end up coming into the private land, so we actually ended up doing this on BLM. And so I go out to the spot, and right, we kind of have a glassing spot that looks out over this huge area. I mean, you can see like 270 degrees. You can see all these canyons, all these mountains and hills and everything, and it's all sagebrush and grass and stuff, so you can see. I mean, they're out there again. Like, you look, they're there. You just got to have the glass and the patience to sector out your areas and thoroughly scan, and you'll find them, right? So we find this herd, and it's 2,000 yards away. It's on the other side of this canyon, and they're up kind of on this saddle. And the guy that's with us is kind of the guide. He works cattle in the area and stuff. He said, well, okay, I think I know where they're going to go. There's water down in the bottom of this draw. They're probably going to make their way down there eventually. So we hop in the truck and drive over there because there's an access road that goes through there. And then we get out and hike down to this, kind of this outlook, right? And we're like, there's this creek coming through, and you can kind of see up on that bench where they're at, and you can see all the game trails and stuff. They're going to funnel right down to this area, right? Mm-hmm. So I got a spike tag. Tyler's got a spike tag. Seth's got a spike tag. Reagan's out there with us, but he's mostly just guiding us, right? Because he knows this area, and we're sitting there waiting, and Reagan gets up to make a phone call. He's going to walk back up to where he can get service because he's going to call his wife and see if she can see this herd and if they're coming towards us. Well, he gets up and turns around, and there's another herd behind us, like 900 yards behind us. And so he's like, holy crap, now we got a whole totally 180, right? And we're like, what are we going to do? Because, like, in order for them to sneak up on him, they've got to get to where they're out of sight. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll stay here and watch. And if they make a run for it, I had my EOR rifle out there. I had my 28 Nosler. The gun weighs like 22 pounds. And so I'm like, I'm not packing this thing all for hell, right? Yeah. And so, which, foreshadowing, I ended up doing that later. So, anyways, they go after it. I'm just waiting. I'm just like watching through the glass. I'm like, man, this is cool, like day one, bunch of spikes in this herd. I'm not as close as I'd like to be, but I could definitely make a shot from here if I really felt like it. Got plenty of time to call the wind, figure out my atmospherics, I'm ranging, counting, just having a good time, just relaxing and watching animals, And finally, I hear a gunshot after about 45 minutes. And so I don't see which spike they shot, right? But so I'm watching the herd, and I'm watching to see where they're going. And I have a couple opportunities where I could potentially take a shot, but they're on the top of this hill, and I don't know what's behind it, right? And there's private property and houses and stuff that are just, I don't know this area. They're scattered out around, ranchers and stuff. So I'm like, well, I don't want to send a bullet into somebody's barn or accidentally shoot a cow or something like that. Yeah. So finally I get up and I go meet up with them, and I don't see anything down. And so I'm like, well, maybe they missed, maybe he shot. And I meet up with Tyler, and he's like, man, picture perfect shot. Seth hit it. It freaking goes on its back up on all fours. We think it's done for, right? He's like, so we're going to switch rifles. And Tyler's actually doing this with this PRS rifle, which is cool. And they go to switch rifles, or he goes to get on the rifle, and it gets back up. And so then there's this confusion, and then he's like, oh, crap, and Seth's got to get back on it because it's his spike. He's got to shoot it again. Uh-huh. And it ends up blending in with the herd, and they can't find it. We go up there, me, Tyler, Reagan, Seth, 4 of us. And we look for blood, and we look for this thing, and it's open, right? But there's private property on one side that we have to wait to get permission to go into, and that's where they went. Mm-hmm. But we could not find blood anywhere. And we dragged this area out. We walked it like search and rescue, like 6 feet apart, like one way, turn around, went the other way. We combed this area, couldn't find blood or anything, right? And so finally we get permission from the landowner to go onto their property, right? And so we go back down to the pickup, get all of our stuff in there, drive all the way around, and these elk are just gone. We can't find them. And we go in the direction that we think they went, and we go after them for quite a ways. And then we go back up the other side, back to where we shot. And they again, we're out there literally all day, covering all this ground, and couldn't find it. Not a sign. And so we're like, at one point we actually get a phone call from somebody, and they said, yeah, we thought we saw an elk down. Well, it turned out it was bad information. It was what they saw was the elk were on this ridge, and some of them were over here, and some of them were over here, and we were looking from this direction, and they just saw elk laying down.
Oh.
And so we actually probably didn't go out as far as we should have, because they said, yeah, we saw it in this area, and we end up just chasing our tails, right? Well, we eventually surmised that this thing is still alive, is probably going to pack this bullet off and live another day, right? And so we're like, okay, well, we still have other tags, and we still have, other people that need to hunt. So,
and you guys put in a good effort.
Yeah, I mean, we literally 4 people. I mean, we were
Yeah.
calling around. There was other hunters in the area, and no sign. I mean, if there had been a big blood spotter or something, then it would have been a different story. You know what I mean? And so, we just basically, counted that tag as gone. Because there's, we don't know. We don't have a definitive answer, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, and obviously, the search wasn't hard on after that, but we're still on the lookout. If we find this thing later, you run out of daylight, then what you got to do? You got to get up the next morning, and you just got to keep looking, right?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, so the next day we get together, and the weather has gotten worse. It's gotten cloudy and rainy and stuff. And we see the herd from the day before, the first one that we saw, which never joined up with the one that we shot into. We end up, they were like way up on the back of this, on the top of this mountain, right? I mean, they're way MF up there. And so we're like, well, we'll wait and see if they come down. So we decided to go shoot some quail, and Reagan had a bull tag on the other, we were right on the unit line. He was on the other unit where general season wasn't applicable.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, well, Seth ended up going with one of the landowners, and they kept looking for this spike again, right? And so me and Tyler and Reagan, we took off and went and tried to fill Reagan's tag. We came back, and they're all still up there. Spikes are still up there. Cows are still up there. And they basically throw in the towel. They're like, all right, weather's too bad. We're not doing that. And I'm like, I'm not going home. I said, there's still daylight. I'm not going home yet. I said, it's all cloudy up there. I can't even see them anymore. I know they're still up there, right? But the whole side of the mountain was obscured, right? And the day before, they were down lower. And so I'm like, I'm just going to sit here and wait. Like, I have nothing else to do. I got food, I got water, I got warm weather gear, I got glass. I'm just going to stay here until I can, And eventually it cleared, right? And they were still way up on top. And I'm like, okay, well, it looks like they're not coming back down today. And it's too late in the day for me to, get pissed and go up after them.
Yeah.
So, so we ended up actually taking the next day off, and because the weather got nastier, and so we took one day. We came back on Tuesday, and the group had broken up a bunch, but we kind of looked up into this draw, and they had moved down, and there was a couple spikes in this group, right? And I told Tyler, I was like, dude, we're going after them. I said, I'm not waiting anymore. They're not going to get any closer.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna run, because they had fragmented, right? And we were watching these cows at one point kind of go weave and bob in and out of these trees, and they joined up with some other cows, and they kind of go up the hill, and we're watching them to see if spikes are going to come out, and join them. And I was like, we got to get a plan together. We got to do this. Because as much as I don't want to carry this heavy ass rifle, I actually brought my 260, which is a lot lighter, like half the weight. But I wanted something with as long a range as possible, because I wasn't sure how close I was going to be able to get.
Right.
So we, like, all right. And so we go down after them, and packing our heavy ass rifles, and our gear and everything else. And luckily we had Seth with us again, and so we were able to give him some stuff to carry, because we just had him and Tyler had a rifle between them. And then so we work our way up this hill, and we finally get to a point where we can't come up any higher, because we get up there and we see that most of them had moved down lower, but there was still a cow up high, and she was looking out, and I'm like, bitch. And so
kind of the lookout for the horse.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And so we're like using like whatever little scrubs, the sagebrush and stuff we can to kind of get up. I'm trying to get up above this grass so I can actually get on the rifle and see through the grass, right? And Tyler's got his tripod with him, and so we get up literally in this sagebrush, right? So we're kind of obscured, and we set the tripod up, and I get the rifle up there, and we thought that we saw another group that had broken off, and there was a spike in this other group, right? And the mistake that we made the first time was not having communication between us, because if I had known what was going on the first day, I would have known that they were going to shoot. I would have been able to either make up a follow-up shot, or I would have been able to shoot my own at the same time. I probably would have been able to make a follow-up shot and be able to stop that spike from running off, And so, which I don't know how you handle that legally with a tag in that situation. It's last blood, right? So then that would have been my tag right there. But at least Seth would have had his opportunity. So
yeah, I mean,
don't say anything to incriminate yourself. We're on camera right now.
I mean, it's like, I don't know, follow up shots, or sometimes you just gotta do them.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, you gotta shoot it till it's dead, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's like
otherwise, it's just suffering with a bullet hole in it.
Yeah.
So.
It's like you can't let an animal suffer. I mean, it's like, I don't know, like people look at hunters. Some people look at hunters like we're like the devil.
Yeah, right.
But it's like when you think of it out in the wild, like a bear, lion, wolf,
disease,
kills something,
starvation, dehydration, exposure, wildfire.
Yeah, the suffering is a lot more gruesome.
Yeah.
Than, shooting something with muzzleloader, arrow, rifle, but then of course you got shot placement too.
True.
But still, it's like there is a lot of people, and I found animals that people have shot.
Yeah, broken off arrowheads and even
it's
bullets.
Like, even like dead. It's like it's like you guys could have put in a little bit more effort. You know, it's like if I gotta leave something overnight due to like weather conditions or whatever, I'm going in, finding last blood, and I'm going to go until like all day until I find that. And of course there's like little indicators too. People don't even think of. Listen to crows.
Yeah.
Listen to birds.
That's we were watching the same thing. We were looking for carrion birds,
Yeah.
Because if something's down, because they can smell it. Animals have a way better sense of smell.
Oh yeah.
So we were looking for carrion birds overhead. You know what I mean? Waiting for gut pile.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that was another indication to us that there was nothing that was bleeding out anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was on its trail.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like elk are so tough. They can reproduce like a quart of blood an hour.
Yeah.
And it's like there's, I've seen it. I've heard stories too. People make a really good shot.
Yeah.
Never find them.
Well, and they say I need to kind of like verify this. There is a kind of a pocket between the back of the shoulder blade, underneath the spine, but above the heart and the lungs, where there's basically nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no arteries. If your bullet doesn't fragment, it's not going to sever an airway, artery, major vein or anything like that. There's basically just this pocket, and it's just at that point, the bullet, it's just a puncture wound.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like getting poked with a sharp stick or something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing in there that's gonna, there's nothing in there that's going to, cause like major trauma or anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't even think there's enough whatever in there for hydrostatic shock. Now obviously the elk that we shot, it knocked the wind out of him, but it didn't create any permanent damage. He was basically able to get up and walk it off because we watched that herd. There was no limping. I mean, he just got up and rejoined him, just like nothing had ever happened.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it just animals are tough, and it's like shot placement is key.
Yeah.
You know, you can have the biggest, most powerful rifle in the world.
Right.
And if you don't make a good shot, then it's not going to go down easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, some people are like, oh, I need this rifle. I need this $10,000 rifle so I can shoot 500 yards. Like, yeah. Or it's like, you know, it's like 1,000 yard, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, number one, have you practiced 1,000 yards?
Yeah.
Number two, when you're in the moment, you're in the moment.
Yeah.
It's not like shooting a target.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just got to know your limits. And I think that's really, really important is people know their limits. They got to know their patience.
Yeah.
And everything too. Because once you're out there, it's just, you can throw everything out the window.
Yeah.
It's like, you just got to have that mental patience. And there's times where I've been, it's like, I'm too patient. I need to shoot. It's like, no, I don't need to shoot because this, and that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it has bit me in the ass before, but on the other hand, it's been a pretty good outcome.
It's better than doing something you regret. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
You know, I've made some regrettable decisions hunting before that. You know, as I got older and more experienced, that I learned that just a little bit of patience would have saved me a lot of headache.
Yeah.
So.
Especially with elk too.
Yeah, they're a whole different animal. They're, like you said, they're a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had some technical difficulties, and now it's what, a week later?
Yeah. You don't have that in one of those big jobs.
Yeah. You get that on these government jobs.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, like I said, this is our first episode, so I mean, I've done a couple little YouTube videos before, but like I haven't done any like long format interview stuff, so didn't really know what I was getting myself into.
Oh, it's all good.
So I think where we left off last was getting ready to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to preface everything I said prior by saying this was like extremely steep. Like this was, you know, I remember like as a kid like hunting and stuff and like seeing these, you know, elk or deer way up there. I'm like, Dad, why aren't we gonna go up there? And he's like, because we're not gonna climb up the side of the mountain. And me and kid, I'm like, I'll totally do it. Like, you just send me up there. I'll climb that mountain right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you actually get up there and you're like, holy shit. Like, because we're looking at this area, you know, earlier when I said like, fuck it, I'm not waiting anymore. Like, what? Like, it's time to do this. You're looking at this from, you know, I'm looking at it from over a mile away, right? And I'm like, yeah, we just, you know, go over there and go there and go up this hill and get on top of this other hill. And there's like all these other like sub hills and stuff like that. There's all these like different like elevation drops and stuff that I'm not even seeing from back there. It's all
hidden draws and everything.
Yeah, it's all hidden behind these draws, right? And so it looks nothing when you get over there. It looks nothing like, which is why tracking is so hard, right? Because like you shoot and then you get over there and you're like, this, I've never been here before. I don't recognize any of this.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we had gained a lot of elevation, even though we'd only closed. If I remember right, we ranged. I want to say we ranged at like 1,900 yards, and then we closed the gap to like 700, right? And so like as the crow flies, we've only gone 1,200 yards, which is like 3/4 of a mile. So, which is, you could walk 3/4 of a mile. I mean, you can hop on one leg if it's flat ground, right?
Yeah.
But you're not, like, that's different when you're going like this, you know, when it's like 45-degree incline or steeper. And like I mentioned before, I'm packing this heavy rifle that is not meant for hunting. It's supposed to be a bench rifle. But I knew that this area, you know, Tyler and I had talked about it all year. We're like, we'll literally shoot as far as we want to. We can push our limits as far as long range hunting goes. Now, obviously, you're still going to try to close the gap within reason. You're not going to take a shot that's stupid just because you can,
right?
Because your odds of success go way down. So, I get up there and we get the rifle on the tripod and everything, and you know, Tyler's like, "What are you gonna do next?" I'm like, "The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a fucking break, and I'm gonna like lay down." And I had my pack off and everything, and I literally laid down in the grass, and I just like closed my eyes. I guess at that point they're on their way, right? They're gonna try to sneak up on this other spike, and we're gonna try to shoot them both at the same time. And but he told me, he's like, you know, if I don't call you or you don't hear a shot in like 10 minutes, he's like, just go ahead and take the shot, right? And so at one point I had gotten back up on the rifle and I'm like watching, and you know, I'm like rechecking all of my dope and everything, ranged with my binos. I had the SIG 10Ks, so I'm taking atmospheric, just making sure everything's correct. I know that this gun shoots high. I haven't quite like figured out like the, you know, the offset of, but it shoots better than the ballistic calculator says it does, right? Which is cool. And so I'm remembering something that I had seen from a guy that he's a match director, and he's somebody that I've shot with, and I've shot a lot of his matches, and he did this video through MDT actually, and he was like, can you take a shot to make a wind call before you shoot the animal without scaring him off? And he literally did it on his own property. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it because I want to know exactly where this bullet's going to hit. And I think we talked a little bit about you shoot, and like animals, they don't always just immediately take off running, right? Unless you're really close on them and you startle them. But from far away, you take a shot, and the first thing they do is they all turn and look towards the noise.
They kind of like hesitate and they like look around real quick before usually they bolt, or sometime it all depends on the situation.
Right.
But yeah, they're like on alert after that.
Right. But yeah, I was like, I'm gonna take this chance, you know. And so this spike is laying, you know, the hill's kind of going like this, and he's laying and he's kind of facing downwards like this, right? But he's laying down, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to take like a laying down shot. Like I'm not a deer, you know, I'm not an elk veterinarian or anything like that. I don't know exactly sure how their anatomy works. And so I didn't plan on this, but I shot, right? I picked a spot where I could see my bullet splash and everything, and I shot right over the top of him, and I got my correction, and I was like, okay, I'm a little bit high, right? And what's he do? He stands up, and I was like, that's it. And I put another round in there, and I held my correction and everything. I didn't even have time to dial it. I just used the reticle and I just held under and shot, and I could see that bullet connect, right? And so he went down, up on all fours, you know, all this other stuff. And I'm just watching him, you know, making sure that he's not going to get back up. And, you know, I can see him trying to pick his head up a little bit and put it back down, but his back end's not moving at all. And I'm like, all right, I hit high, but I hit the spine, right? So I know he's paralyzed, but also I had a similar shot on a deer a few years ago, and he like literally dirt napped. Like he didn't pick up his head at all. I shot him and he went down, and I thought he was down and out. And we were on top of this cliff, and we didn't want to climb down the cliff. So we went backtracked and came up from the bottom. And he was gone. We got there. He wasn't gone, but you know, we panicked because it wasn't where we left him. And then we seen him a couple hundred yards away, and we're like, oh, okay. But he literally, I mean, he was paralyzed from here down. He literally did this and climbed his way out of there. And I was like, so now I've got a rule about double tapping, like I said about Seth's, you know, about Seth's spike. You know, we're gonna double tap from here on out. Yeah. So, because I'm just not losing an animal again. And personally, I've never lost one. But like being there and watching somebody go through that, especially, you know, he's a first time hunter and stuff, that's not how you want to start out your season. So anyways, so Tyler calls me and he's like, did you get him? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, this other spike isn't here, so we're going to come help you. And we rendezvous. And it takes me, I pack my shit as far as I'm willing to. It flattens out and then it goes up again, right? And I get right to the bottom and I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave my rifle and everything right here. I'm just going to take my knife and my pack and my water, and that's it. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to dress this thing out and we're going to get it out of here. And it's still, I mean, it took me 45 minutes to get from where I shot to up there. I mean, it was steep. It was like walk a little bit and then take a breather. Walk a little bit we're talking like maybe 10 or 20 yards at a time because it's like straight up, right?
Then you got all that excitement built into it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, you know, we got up there, we got him, we got him quartered out, got back straps, got all the good stuff. I didn't end up taking any of the organs or anything like that, because what I found of the bullet at that time was little tiny pieces.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, everything is just been shrapneled, right? And so later on, I got it home, and we got the quarters. We're cutting them up. I actually found the rest of the bullet.
Oh yeah.
And it was not much of it. It was just the ass end of it, basically. And so the whole front of that bullet had basically exploded. But then the butt of it kept going through and went through the other shoulder and lodged into the other shoulder.
So it's still partially held together.
Yeah, it almost made an exit wound, right? Uh-huh. Which is saying a lot, because that was a match bullet. I shot it with a 190 tip, which is not a hunting bullet. But I've shot a lot of animals with match bullets, and I know what they do, and I was confident in its terminal performance. But if it had been something like an AccuBond or even like an ELDX, it probably would have done the same thing, but also went through the other side, and I would have had 2 wound channels. Mm-hmm. And unlike what happened with Seth's, I saw the blood spot. I mean, it literally splattered blood on the other side of the behind him where it shot. And so I'm like, okay, that's what it's supposed to do. So anyways, and then we get it quartered up. I take the 2 hind quarters and I'm dragging them back, and we take the 2 front quarters and put them on Seth, and then Tyler takes everything else, the antlers and the the genitals and all the stuff you need for identification, along with a bag with some tenderloins and stuff in it. And I'm dragging these hind quarters, and the fur on their legs is so slick that I literally, it wasn't that I couldn't carry it anymore, I couldn't grip the legs anymore. Mm-hmm. And I just could only get so far before my grip strength, I literally couldn't hold on to these things. I'm like, God damn it, man, what am I going to do? And finally I get him drugged to a point where I get the first thing I do is I take my knife and I cut through the tendons, and I take them and I stick them together, right? Mm-hmm. And I drag them for a little ways, and then finally I get them, and I get them up on my shoulders, and which was a task, because that's a lot of weight on an elk. Yeah. And so I finally get them, and this is after hiking all day and all this other stuff, right? And so I get them up on my shoulders, and I get a little ways, and finally I can't take that anymore. I go back to dragging them, and I get down to a tree, and I bust off a tree limb, a nice dry straight one, and I stick that through. Then I got something to hold on to, you know what I mean? So then I'm like, all right, and I'm dragging these things, and I'm trying to keep them on the fur side so I'm not ruining a bunch of meat, because for some reason we didn't have any game bags. I don't know where who had them in what pack and where we left them, but they weren't there. Yeah. And so I'm trying not to ruin the meat, and finally we get down to the bottom, and Reagan's down at the bottom, and he sees me, and he kind of meets me at the last eighth of the journey. And I'm like, here, I'm gonna take these, man. I can't carry this anymore. And I got back in time to go get my son from school. So, but yeah, that was super interesting. That's not my longest shot to date, but it was a long shot, and it was a hard-earned long shot. It wasn't just, pull over on the side of the road and shooting across the canyon or whatever. Yeah. There was a lot of actual hunting involved. There was a lot of, tracking and glassing and, covering the ground to get up there, and weather played a key, and, all that stuff. And so, altogether, I think it was a very memorable hunt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one
one you're always going to remember.
Yeah.
Because of all the work you put in.
Yeah.